When do you need him?
Kind of at the beginning would be good.
Okay.
Just last time we had people ask us to go through like a full office visit essentially. So figured we can do a little play acting.
That sounds good.
No, but it means their results as well. Because they didn't rate it as much as subsystem. So they did not train on the big they did, but they did not select which basically means that the results still rise. But it's not just
I hear someone literally so lengthy and they don't say anything or they'll just ask you a question out of nowhere. Like, what you're talking about.
I heard you say
Yeah.
perfect for
Yeah, they're gonna glaze over. We had a guy one time, like, talking for maybe 2 minutes in the hallway to do something else before he got called out by the congressman to do something. So I didn't say it in a meeting. He was like, oh, sorry, my BlackBerry's going off, gotta go.
yeah, so
Okay. Right. Yeah, I feel like that.
the city
3:30 thing. They were planning just really
We
quickly
don't
at the
necessarily
end
decide
of
a
the
lot
day
of things
tomorrow
because
at like
it's
4.
it's not
And
really
then
pushing to 30.
pull everybody in the
required
interview.
as of now.
Our former chief
Yes.
was trying to be agile 5 and
No, it's not like history anymore. It used to be a lot necessarily loaded into research mode. Now it's a lot more analytical and interactive.
that's our
People
big thing
commenting
is
on
Perfect.
like
That's easy.
no big
Yeah.
things that happened
But
before.
tomorrow
It's not
at the
necessarily
summit,
important.
we
we'll get
have
together
The
as a group
argument
and
is
just
made
kind of
that
see where we
it's
stand.
actually ridiculous. Unless
it's very
the
cool.
era in which it took place was significant to the argument itself. So if you're writing about something that happened in 1952, it's really important to know that that was a point where the vote for slave states were expanded kind of almost all of the political. So if your subject has something to do with that, then that's
Yeah,
important.
because
But if
like
your subject has
the
knowledge
doers
of
of
this
that.
larger portfolio of mechanisms and how it relates to well, like if I write an article, like the article that I'm writing right now, is specifically about the events of 1934. It only took place in 1934. It had effects that lasted beyond the president the year before. The whole event was 4 months ago. So all I have to remember is, like I have to remember the dates. In May, like this happened here, this happened in June. It's more about the actual argument that I'm making and the evidence that I have.
Yeah, that's usually my first boss left Coach he was the dean of the college
See, that's the thing, we also
science.
don't necessarily just hone in on
And
factual pieces
that
because
was
facts
getting used to like the different
are
colleges we
really
used to
nothing
be.
without any
I mean I
context
knew about
behind
it
it.
because you know, applying for
So like it tells you
fascinating
nothing
that's
that JFK was assassinated because like it was that's kind of useless to it. It's much more useful if you know that the political climate when JFK's assassination was really important because, he was we were on the edge of a breakthrough in diplomatic relations with China or whatever it is you want to argue. So I mean like you need to know when things happen, but that's 10% of what you really need to know. In relation to what you were asking though,
right.
honestly, I don't know how to approach that because there actually is a subfield of history called the history of science. And Carnegie Mellon actually has
waiting on Jen to come back, but she had an important phone call she had to get on, so she's not going to be here for a couple minutes. Chris is going to help out. Alex is going to help out. So this time right here is mostly for role playing. So this is like a time for us to basically perform a little skit for you on what it's like to go into a congressional office. This is also a time that Alex is going to help us out at first, but you can go with Sam if you're like really stoked about the advocacy stuff and you don't feel like you need a lot of practice on the legislative role-playing side. You've got that nailed down, go talk to Sam. They're just going to be out in the hallway kind of talking, round-tabling. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you a couple scenarios. Alex is going to pretend to be a staffer for us. He's going to give us, like, you know, good scenarios, bad scenarios, what it's like to walk into an office. Chris and I are going to be bright, shiny-eyed graduate students on the Hill for the first time. So excited to be in the Capitol building. Okay, maybe, I'm not sure I can do that, but I'll try.
We're doing good first or bad first?
Let's do a good one first.
Okay. I don't know how to do good as well.
Yeah, where's it? Here, have it.
Yeah,
Have some
that's it.
chairs. We're gonna do some chairs. So when you go up on the Hill, you'll usually walk into the office, and some of these offices are really, really tiny. And so you might have meetings in the hallways for particularly really junior members of the House. So just so you know, they're not intentionally trying to shove you off. They just literally don't have a place for you to sit. So we're assuming that we're in an office that does. Okay, so we.
Hall first?
Yeah, so you meet in the hallway. This is our hallway. You meet in the hallway.
What you want to do is make sure you have your game plan ready to go. Okay? So you want to lead?
Yes, I will lead.
So you can, which items do you want to talk about?
I'll talk about faster.
Faster, okay. I'll talk about student debt and health insurance.
Sounds great.
Okay?
All right, let's do it. Okay, so you walk in. Usually there'll be some kind of receptionist sitting right here. And you'll say, hey, we're here for a 2:15 meeting with Representative so-and-so. And they'll be like, great, would you like some water? Would you like some craisins? Sometimes they have like, one of our offices has craisins because they grow cranberries in Washington State, okay? So you're like, okay, yeah, like I'd love some water, yada, yada. And they'll be like, great, well, they'll see you in a minute. And then this like 25-year-old will walk out and he'll be like, wait, I'm talking to a 25-year-old? So here you go.
So they'll come out and they'll be blah, 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 blah. It's nice to meet you. Come on in. This is the room that we'll be in. You won't always be in a room, however. Sometimes they'll stick you out into just the main like vestibule. So that does happen. Be prepared to work around that.
Yeah. They'll
Stefanik's
usually
office.
hand some cards out to you. So
Yeah. So while you're getting into the room, everybody's like changing their 8 cards. If you brought handouts, leave behinds, things like that.
So you sit down and.
So let me know what you guys are here for. Remind me the organization that you're representing.
So we're here as part of the National Association of Graduate Professional Students Legislative Action Days. And it's a moment for all of the graduate students across the country to come together and go up on the Hill and really talk about our issues. So the main issues we're talking about today are free access to science and technology, as well as graduate student debt and healthcare issues.
Tell me more about the access.
So what we'd like you to support, I'm going to assume he's a senator's person, okay? We'd love if you would take a look at Senate Bill 779. I can talk. We'd love if you would take a look at S779. This is a act called the Free Access to Science, Technology, and Research Act. It has a congressional budget score of 0. It would be amazing for folks like us who rely on research if we didn't have to hit paywalls all the time. It would be a much greater use of taxpayer dollars. And incidentally, it's already been reported out of committee, so it just needs to go to a vote. I think it would be a great sort of win-win situation for both Democrats and Republicans. It's a bipartisan bill, and at this point, you might ask.
So I would say, if I'm being nice, I might say something. You sometimes get lucky. That's when I was a graduate student, I had these same issues. I would bump up against paywalls. It delayed my research. I'm really happy to hear that you're working on it. Can you tell me precisely what the ask is for the senator?
Yeah, so the ask would be for the senator to either co-sponsor this bill, since it's just sort of languishing, or to see if they can pressure folks to get it up for a vote finally.
I see, thank you.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the other issues, unless there's more you want me to say.
Okay. So there are a couple issues I wanted to talk to you about. One is student health insurance, and the second is student debt, especially for graduate and professional students.
Okay.
So with student health insurance, last year the IRS started enforcing this policy in the ACA that would remove actually graduate students from being eligible for student health insurance plans in college. I know if you were paying attention last year at the University of Missouri, you would have seen the uproar
Yes.
when they took
So
away.
that was also about health insurance?
Yes, that was actually also about health insurance. What happened was the university was frightened that they were going to be fined tens of thousands of dollars a day, millions of dollars a year for providing health insurance to its graduate students. Um, about 18 senators wrote a letter to the Secretary of Health and Human Services about continuing to provide these student health insurance plans to graduate students. We didn't see your boss's name on it. We would love to see him support that, because ultimately what these student health insurance plans do is they actually support what the actual purpose of ACA is. They provide affordable health insurance for students who are living at the margins.
Now, are these for all students, graduate students? Why do the students get this health insurance?
Well, the plans are ultimately available to all students, but in a lot of cases, graduate students who are on assistantships, so whether they're teaching assistantships or research assistantships, they're sometimes provided in with their compensation.
I see.
Now, different schools do it differently, and so depending on the institution, how they actually package things.
Do you have a white paper on this that I could pass along to the senator?
We actually don't have one in hand, but I can send one to you after the meeting.
Fantastic.
Via email. Also, student debt. So you've seen in the news recently that we currently hit like $1.3 trillion of student debt in the country. What you don't see in those the numbers is the fact that graduate students are disproportionately affected by student debt. So currently, the federal government makes 77% of the profits on student loans on 13% of the borrowing population, which are graduate and professional students.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the average student debt for a PhD student is $75,000.
Wow.
For a professional student, it's $146,000. And this ultimately, leads to the detriment of these students as they're transitioning from grad student life to the real world.
How does that impact them?
Well, it would force them to delay major purchases in their adult life. So like buying a car, buying a house, even postponing having children. And most importantly, really, starting small businesses, which is the heart of our economy. If you're a graduate student, $150,000 in debt out of school, you won't take on another $200,000, $300,000 for a small business loan.
Well, that sounds like something that the senator would absolutely be willing to support.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, so there are a few pieces of legislation being offered by different members of Congress, but our major ask is that we want to see two things. Number one is a reunification of graduate student rates with the undergraduate student rates. That came out of whack about 7 years ago.
Okay.
And we also want to see an overall reinstatement of the in-school interest subsidy, because previously graduate students were eligible for subsidized student loans, so they would not have to pay interest during the time that they were studying. Those were taken away a while back, and so students actually accrue interest as they're studying.
But that's only for 4 years or so?
For graduate students, it could be up to 8 years. The average time to degree for a PhD is about 8 years.
I see.
And so we actually have more information on this. We'd love to follow up with you and send you that information.
I think the senator would support that.
Great. And please feel free to use us as a resource as well. Obviously, we have some asks for you, but if there's anything the senator has that's close to their heart that involves education that graduate students could help out with, let us know.
So sometimes the super friendly senators actually will, or staffers will respond with something that they're currently working on that they want us to support. And that's really fantastic when they do. When that happens, just be enthusiastic, take down any information, and bring it back to the debrief so that we can sort of process it and go through it. So at this point, I guess I would probably just say thank you very much for coming in. Pass along the materials. You have my information.
We appreciate your time, sir.
Pleasure.
Thanks. And usually those meetings will only last about 15, 20 minutes if you're lucky. So make sure you've got a good plan before you go in. If you're going in with multiple people, sort of split up what you're going to talk about. You saw Chris and I sort of quickly confer. If it's your first time, you might want to do this beforehand. So if you're kind of nervous, don't drink coffee that morning. Otherwise, you'll be like me, and you'll be like, I can't talk, and I'm shaking.
Yeah.
So.
What you also might want to do in your group, depending on size, you want to pick some person who's the point person, who's the point guy, okay? Who's going to navigate this meeting. So it'll be someone who might not necessarily have a particular platform point to talk about, but they're the person where if I stumbled and I said, they would say yes, and they would interject. Also, if the person who's talking is talking too long or maybe going astray, they would kindly interject and
Right.
steer the conversation back in the right direction. So-
Knowing each other's sort of body
Right.
language and signals is good to know, to be able to flag each other, because sometimes it's hard to pay attention to the person's body language while you're talking. You're trying to go through this spiel that you've memorized. You're a little bit nervous because you've just gone through security and all this other stuff, and you're surrounded by all these people. And so it's a little bit hard to sometimes pick up when the staffer's responding negatively, you're talking too long or something like that. So it's good to sort of have a little bit of a way to communicate to each other without speaking, without having to cut each other off.
Do you want to do a bad scenario?
Give it a shot.
Quick.
I think I can do this. All right.
All right.
This does happen. You
Yeah,
do
so
get
you ready-
really
I mean,
mean
you know
people
what you wanna talk?
sometimes.
Yeah, let's just do the same thing.
Yeah, we'll do just,
We'll just wing it.
we'll do the
It'll
thing,
be
yeah.
fine.
It'll be fine.
Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Pleasure to have you.
How you doing?
Please come on in. So this is for undergraduate students, or?
No, we're actually graduate students, and we're representing the National Association of Graduate and Professional Students. So we have graduate students from about 15 schools in Washington, D.C. this weekend and this week going up on the Hill and talking about some of our most important issues.
Okay.
And one second, something we haven't done that you probably will do, they'll ask for introductions. They'll
Oh.
say, like, where are you from? Obviously, it'll be from your home state. You'll say, like,
Forgot
I'm
about
Katie Harris. I'm a PhD student in archaeology from Washington State University. So we haven't done it here because we don't know what state we're in, but
They want to make sure you're actually from their They will not listen to you if you say something other than where they are, what they represent.
right. So for those of you that live in, say, like North Carolina, but are from New York and maybe vote in New York, just play to your audience, right? So if you're going to a New York audience, be like, well, I live in North Carolina, but I actually vote in New York. If you're in the North Carolina office, just say, I live in North Carolina, and they're not going to ask you if you actually vote there or not.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
We're here to talk about some issues. Our first big one would be the Fair Access to Science Technology Research Act. And you can't really see it up here, but he's giving me the most blank stare in the world. This will happen sometimes. They just sort of haven't had their morning coffee or something, and they'll kind of space out on you and be looking like at the ceiling. And you're like, I don't know if this person is really hearing me. So when that happens, just keep going. Don't take it personally. They have a lot of meetings every day, especially since they've only got like 30 days left in session. So blah, 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 Free Access to Science and Technology Act. I think it would be really great. It would help researchers all over the country, not only graduate professional students, but other researchers. So we would really appreciate your support on this bill.
what's wrong with these researchers? I have a cousin who goes to MIT and he makes $32,000 and he doesn't even work. Why do you students that don't even work get all this money? Why should we be doing this?
Well, I think the issue at hand is that we're talking about free access to something that taxpayers are already paying for. So we're really talking about using taxpayer money more wisely. We're taking out these grants to fund research, and then the same people who are doing this research are the ones who are having to pay to access their own articles. So really, you have to think about how it impacts the taxpayer and how it's not a great use of money if you do it that way.
I see. And do you have other things that you'd like to talk about?
Yes, actually, there are two things I'd like to talk about. One is student health insurance, and the other one is student debt. So first of all, with student health insurance, there's a provision in the ACA that is being applied to colleges and universities that is ultimately going to prevent them from.
I want to call Chris out for a sec. So Chris so I'm making shit faces at them, and Chris shifted his body language in a defensive body language. I would suggest not doing this. I would suggest responding to the negative attitude by staying open and sort of pushing in.
You picked that up.
And it would be like if I sat here and started crossing my arms.
Exactly. So remain calm and relaxed. Okay. But I'm defensive now.
Because I just cut Katie off and didn't let her finish her spiel about faster.
So yeah, it's going to be this provision in the ACA is going to be applied to universities where they aren't going to be able to provide graduate students with student health insurance plans, and ultimately you're going to have tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of graduate students across the country without affordable health insurance.
Now, when I was 22, I had 3 kids, and I was supporting a wife and a family, or or shoot, the senator was. Damn it, I forgot I was a staffer.
When my
Anyway,
boss.
when my boss. Why do these kids need all these things? I mean, they're going to college. They're going to make wonderful salaries. Why do we have to support all of this?
Well, so for a few reasons. Number one, oftentimes these health insurance plans are like tied in with their assistantships, and so these grad students make the choice to attend their university because of not only their stipend but the availability of health insurance and other things that they're going to need to make it. And two, not all graduate students are paid highly. You know, some grad students make as little as $10,000 to $12,000 a year, and so having affordable access to healthcare is ultimately important to them because of those reasons.
I see.
And so there's a letter floating around from other members of the Senate that was addressed to the Department of Health and Human Services that we would ultimately like your boss to look at and see if he would be willing to sign.
I don't think that's a priority for the senator, but is there anything else you'd like to?
Does he not like appreciate grad students in higher education?
He thinks that people should pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Well, if you're on the ground and you pull your bootstraps up, ultimately your legs fly over your head. But that's another story.
So what's happening here is that now Chris is getting really defensive. You just made him angry, right?
So I've now closed my Padfolio that was probably never open, but I've now closed it.
I was going to talk to you about student debt, but I assume you probably wouldn't be receptive to that. The fact that the government is profiting off of graduate students, making a profit on student loans, and ultimately being a detriment to the economy.
No. And you do have to get yourself out of these situations sometimes.
Well, ultimately we would like to see two things. Number one is a leveling of the interest rates for graduate students and undergraduate students, and we would like to see the in-school interest subsidy return for graduate and professional students, because currently they have to pay interest on loans as they're studying. This is really important to not just higher education, but also the economy, and I'd like to continue this dialogue with you, if possible, via email, to see where your boss is on this.
Well, you're welcome to send me anything by email.
All right.
It does work with the things like the debt to tie it back to the economy, and the fact that grad students typically want to stay where they're going to school. They want to build a life there, so they're not just going to come in and out like undergrads and leave. So they want to build something. They have children. The average age is 32, and so they are. If you keep them around, they will put that money back into that representative or that senator's economy. So tying the debt stuff back that way is helpful. The health insurance is helpful for having them keep their university competitive. So if they don't seem to be responding to individual students having a claim to access to healthcare, they might respond to keeping the crown jewel of their university or of their state university system competitive so that it can attract the best talent.
Right. And the other thing with student debt that you might talk about is there's sort of a pervasive myth on the Hill sometimes that graduate students are all going to make over six figures the second we walk out of the door. Right, yeah. Which might be true for some folks, but isn't true for most of us, correct? So when they say that, and you might hear that at some point, just say, well, actually there are many professions that require a graduate degree that don't make that much money. So a good one that I like to pull out is a Master of Social Work. There's actually a huge demand for social workers right now in this country. It takes a master's degree at minimum, and they only make $40,000 a year, okay? If you're lucky, yeah. And so that's a great one to pull out if they're like, whatever, you're all gonna make like $200,000 a year, you're fine, you know? So something like that.
Yeah. And so I'd only reiterate what Alex pointed out earlier. This is probably a more extreme example, but don't be surprised if when you are in your meetings, you get people who aren't engaging but aren't engaging. They will look at you and they're listening and they're taking notes, but they're not giving you any like any verbal cues, any bodily cues. They're not okay, I get you. It's like and so just stay the course.
Yeah.
Keep calm. Don't get defensive. Never, even if, because sometimes it's happened to me a couple times. Even if they make a snarky comment or two, or something you don't necessarily agree with, don't respond in kind. Stick to your points and continue with the meeting.
Yeah. The robotic ones is a common thing to happen. I mean, you think that they're not they are taking notes, but for all you, like, There's nothing on their face registering. They could just be jotting, down their grocery list for like tonight. We had one of those. Was it March that we were here?
Mhm.
And it ended up when we were done talking, the person like lifts their head up and just says like 4 projects that they wanted to collaborate on and like legislation they wanted to send our way for comments and like all this amazing stuff. So you just got to do your spiel and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But he didn't respond to my email.
No, I was thinking, who was the redhead that we met with?
Also, pay attention to their body language. Once they start looking at their watch, looking around, once you see that, they're checking out. So whoever's talking at that point in time, that's their cue to move on to something else. To wrap that up.
We once had a meeting in a hallway because there just wasn't room. We had a meeting in a hallway, and he started checking his phone like 2 minutes. Like he was just sitting on his BlackBerry, like scrolling through, checking his phone, and you could tell he was just not listening at all. And then he's like, "I'm sorry, I have to cut this meeting short. The congressman needs me." And so we got to get through, I don't know, about a third of our spiel. So we basically just said, "Okay, give us 1 more minute," and we like ran through everything, and then we followed up. But ironically, that same guy, we saw him again last year and this year. And he was like way more receptive. I think it depends on the day you get them. We also learned to ask them where they're from, because a lot of times they're from the state you're from.
Interesting.
And so they'll be like, "Oh, I'm from Seattle." And so I could be like, "Oh, I don't live there, but I love this one restaurant. Have you ever been there?" Kind of try and charm them a little bit before you get in. They want to be treated like people too, and they're meeting all day.
Yeah, don't underestimate small talk. That goes a long way to breaking the ice, to getting things. Say, "Hey, good morning. How you doing? You guys getting ready to, you're getting towards the end of session. How are things around here? Election time, crazy, huh?"
How about this weather? It's so hot
Right.
outside right now. Not really. We talked about that a lot this
Yeah.
past few days.
I'd say probably the key thing too in your meeting preparation. So we laid out about 5 points: open access, funding for higher ed, student debt, student visas, and student health insurance. Right. To get through 5 of those in a meeting in 15, 20 minutes,
It's a little extensive.
it's overkill.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is do your research on your member of Congress before you go in. If you know this office has a horrible stance on immigration, even though student visas aren't necessarily immigration, don't talk about it. Okay, unless for some reason you know that they're going to be receptive to it. Okay, if you know this person has stances completely anti to what we're asking for, you can take those 5 issues, narrow them down to the top 3 you think they're going to be receptive to, or at least start off with those 3.
Or if they sit on a certain committee or anything like that, help you prioritize best bang for your buck.
Right. Do you have any questions for us? Kind of rambled along for a while. We planned on using the rest of the time for either your questions or to have you all put your heads together and start coming up with your own strategies for your meetings on Monday and Tuesday.
Do you have any recommendations if a legislator you're talking to, the staff member you're talking to, says something like you said to the first session, the senator is interested in this sort of
Thing.
Repeat the question
indicating
Okay.
like non-receptiveness to multiple points.
Multiple things. Yeah, so he asked, what do you do if they just flat out say no, or they say, "No, we're not interested in that"? My suggestion would be, if you have something else to talk about, to say, "All right, well, maybe they would be interested in ... and just go ahead and transition to the next thing. That's probably easiest. If it's the end of the meeting and they've just not done anything at all, just say, "Thank you for your time. We'll be following up with you." Get out of there.
If they say no and they keep saying no to things, but they don't indicate in their body language that they're trying to get away from you, which is likely they're probably going to just get away from you. But if they're not, if they just sit there, you could try engaging and say, "Could you explain a little bit what sort of opposition you think we might run into," or something like that, and let them give their side.
Right. Well, yeah. What's your boss's stance on this? So we can better understand what's going on.
I saw, Daniel, let you go first.
Oh, I was just going to be kind of snarky to fill time if nobody had any answers.
Okay.
This is a really easy question, I think. Has it ever happened, or is there a history of it happening where we show up and they are late?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, okay, I thought so. So then what is protocol kind of in that situation? Do we just wait patiently, or do we try and reach out to somebody like, "Hey, do you know when he or she's going to be back?"
Yeah, just wait. Usually they'll know where they are. Usually they're late because they had an impromptu staff meeting, or they had another meeting run long. They're pretty good at keeping it fairly well on time, and it's not going to cut in. It usually is not going to cut into the meeting you have, so you're still probably going to get your 15-minute meeting.
That was what I was thinking. If
Yeah.
they show up 5 minutes late, it's like, all right, well, I know we had 15, but now you only have 10. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Scratch that.
Yeah.
And maybe in a situation like that, you might want to ask, because they'll come in and if they're late, they will be apologetic. They'll be like, I'm sorry, this thing happened.
Yeah.
I'm here now. You might want to ask, so how much time do we have at the beginning? Just to make sure you can gauge, because they might say, well, hey, I can only meet for 15 minutes. But generally, they'll try to get you your entire meeting time.
And I think it's useful. I don't think we've mentioned this, or maybe we have, but to flag to them sort of how many topics. I'm going to talk to you. We want to talk to you about 3 different topics today. Just give them some sense so that they're not kind of blindly going from topic to topic, wondering when it's going to end, wondering if you have a plan. Just to give them that little bit of something to grasp onto.
And then usually it works better to hit them with the most important or most relevant issue first. So if you just want to briefly mention, like, thank you for supporting science funding, we would appreciate it if you would continue doing so if you're in an office like that. You might leave that towards the end, because that's something, like we were in one of our senator's offices yesterday, and she constantly supports science. She's on the committee. She might actually be the like chair of it if the Senate flips. And so we didn't really spend a lot of time going on and on and on about our science funding. We just said thank you at the end, because there's no reason to explain it all to them. They know. So again, know thy audience. Yeah.
So how would you go about conversing with someone who seems to be a little bit more educated on the topic, or seems to be combative of the topic based off of their own knowledge of something? So
Right.
if you talk about like graduate student debt, and they're in their office and we're not as knowledgeable about the situation, how do you sort of configure that conversation?
I think I'll speak to the more educated person on the topic, and maybe you all can do the combative part, because we actually have pretty good luck with not getting combative folks in Washington State. So yesterday we went in and we talked about healthcare with a staffer who happened to, that's like what she does in this one office. She is a healthcare expert, and she asked us a lot of pointed questions, not because she was trying to be combative or anything, but just because she wanted to see like more details on the issue, what was going on, so that she could better understand sort of what advice to give us or how to help us, basically. And she ended up saying, you really need to look into this particular case, and like the legislature solved it this way, and you maybe think about doing this. So they're like, if they are an expert or educated on the issue, they're going to ask you questions, but they're not necessarily going to be combative about it. So it could be a good and a bad thing. A lot of times they're combative when they don't know as much about the issue.
Yeah. Play to their knowledge. If they are knowledgeable, play to their knowledge. And if they keep asking you questions that you can't answer, make up a name of somebody who is an expert that you know, and tell them that you'll get in contact with that person and follow up with them the next day or later that day, and then find somebody to give that info.
I would say also, don't be afraid to say, if you're in a meeting and you're asked a question, let's say they seem knowledgeable and they're not necessarily combative, just engaging, and they say, well, have you thought about this, or I have evidence to the contrary, blah, 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 and they ask you, don't be afraid to say, you know what, I don't know at this point, but I will follow up with you on that. Find me, Katie, Sam, Alex, Jen, whomever, and let us know. Ask us. We can probably get resources to you, and then that's your in to follow up. You can say, thank you for meeting with us. We talked about this topic, and you asked me a question. Here's the answer. Here's the follow up to that, or here's our position on that. So don't be afraid to say, you know what, I don't know, I can't answer that right now, but I can get back to you with that information.
And most of them won't expect you to be experts at this. What they are expecting, and what you should definitely do, is tell your story. So if you're an international student, talk about how F1 visas have impacted you. If you're, or maybe not, because we're not doing that this time, but you can talk about that a little bit. If you're on a research grant that got hit hard by sequestration, or your advisor maybe was hit hard by sequestration, you can talk about that. We talked a lot about, you know, how bad it would be for us to lose our healthcare. So when you're doing your meeting sort of prep, sort of say, okay, what's the story I'm going to personally tell? Because they love personal stories, and you'll get asked when you're talking about an issue, do you have stories from your school that would further support this? Because they can really use stories to sort of break hearts on the Senate and House floors, basically.
Can I make a comment? Something that might help you is make sure you're taking notes while you're in the meeting. If you say you're going to follow up with X, Y, and Z, make sure you're writing that down so you know.
Yeah.
And any kind of like personal anecdotal stories about that particular staffer that you can write in your notes that you can then type up so you can save for later to like bring that up, which helps with relationship building and that kind of thing.
Every part of the experience is really useful to document because you're going to have people from your university coming again in the spring, again next fall. And so every little sort of bit of knowledge, creating that institutional memory so that they don't have to go through the things that you have to go through is always helpful.
We have a Google Doc at Mizzou spanning back till, I think, 2012. Every meeting we've ever been to, the name of the staffer, their contact information, with specific notes on how they reacted to certain topics, statements that they made, so that if we go into our to meetings now, even though we have a different group, we can say, oh, you met with our colleague back in the spring, you talked about this.
Did we mention personal stories versus data?
I just did.
Okay.
Yeah, we have like fact sheets on each of our senators and representatives. It has like their picture, where they got their degree, because a lot of them, they're Cougs too. So they'll be like, oh, you're from WSU, oh, go Cougs, and you can like bond with them that way, and then they automatically look at you more favorably. And then we just make notes, like Chris said, about how the meetings went, what they were or weren't receptive to, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'd say again, not just be relaxed. Just relax. 80% of the people you talk to won't be topic experts on the things that you're talking about.
So to give you an idea, a House staffer usually has about 20 different issues that they have to cover. So their knowledge is a mile wide and like a half an inch deep. It's really, really shallow. You might know more than they do, honestly. Senate staffers might be a little more knowledgeable depending on who you're meeting with. They're often specialized in issues, or they only have like 3 or 4 issues. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, so just be relaxed, and to further mention what Katie and Alex talked about. We have data, and that's great, but if you have a personal story, that's what the members of Congress take to their colleagues and say, hey, they have a stack of papers, that they've been sent with data, data upon data.
Yeah.
And when they meet that one guy, who lost his farm because of blah, when they meet that one person whose kid got sick because of X, that's the story that they can take and say, there's this lady in my district, Jane Johnson from wherever, and her daughter Mary was a victim of this, that, and that. And that's what they want to take. So if you have personal stories, if you've been like student debt, you can talk about your own student debt. Look, I'm in school to be a social worker because I want to help people in rural communities. I know I'm not going to make a bunch of money, but my services are going to be needed in these communities. And so it's important that student debt is kept in check. So
data gets the language written, it gets the bills and the legislation written, but it does not get your foot in the door. So the personal stories are what does that, what do that.
Any further questions?
Obviously, this is not an ideal situation, but if you weren't able to get an answer for someone and you walk by their office and there's people in there, is it just horribly rude and don't do it to just stick your head in and say, hey, do you have a few minutes?
No, do it.
No, do it.
We did that last time we were here with, it wasn't even members of the Missouri delegation, it was Judy Chu.
Right.
It was Judy Chu's office.
Repeat it for the back.
Oh, yeah. So the question was, if you were trying to get a meeting with a particular member of Congress and you didn't, is it rude to just stop into their office and say, hey, can I talk to somebody? It's totally appropriate to go into an office and say, and introduce yourself, let them know who you are, where you're from, and say, we reached out to get an appointment, didn't hear back. I wanted to know if there's anybody I can talk to right now. And sometimes it might be the person who's behind the desk. Sometimes they might call a person at the back, and they might only have 5 or 10 minutes, but you can at least talk to them about the most important thing on your list. We stopped in Judy Chu's office in March just to thank her for her legislation, on student debt, and we ended up talking about 2 or 3 more issues for 15 minutes because we stopped in. And we've had other members say, hey, we reached out for 5 appointments, only got answers for 3 back, but we're going to stop into these other 2 offices, and generally it's fine.
Any other questions? Doing good?
What about inviting people that have done it before? Anything we maybe missed? Yeah, if like Daniel or
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We missed anything like Daniel or yeah.
I don't know. Do you guys recommend having an ample supply of business cards ready so that you can hand one to the person at the front desk and one to the staffer you're meeting with later?
Yeah.
If you have business cards, this is the place you bring them and hand them out like candy. Okay?
Some meetings will be like 3 different staffers sitting in it, and you just
Everywhere you go, give somebody a business card. Trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good idea to research the staffer you're going to see. Their LinkedIn page is generally open, so you get to see where they went to school, what they did their dissertation on. If they're currently a grad student, it helps you to figure out how you're going to break the ice beforehand and essentially relate the issues you have back to their personal experiences or potential personal experiences, so that they can become a champion for your cause. Essentially, is the strategy that you would employ there. We had that very successful with two of the 3 people we met last year. Just essentially engaging with their experiences as grad student, as an undergrad, and so they responded back to our emails and they said they're better.
I thought we did so well in that one too.
Really? I did.
Well, feel free if you have any other questions to talk to those of us who've done it before. But otherwise, we're hoping that you would use this next hour or so to start developing your strategy for Monday. You've heard a little bit about issues now. We do have some updated one-pagers to send you, but if you look at our website, the LAD website, we have the ones from like the spring up there still, I think. So it's close enough that you could, if you want to dive into it a little more, you could look at those. So go for it.
Yeah. We'll walk around and feel free to use this as a resource right now.
Yeah, it ended up being really, I mean, like 90% of it was gabbing and catching up.
Yeah. I was flipping through my phone. Is this you?
Yeah, there is a reason that I kind of,
Anyone want to register for the
it was just like everyone always has a reason to have lunch with someone. Very rarely is it a social call.
Unless I might have hit it and the phone didn't flash.
Yeah, like when you were, yeah.
So this is really specific to somebody that I'm meeting with, but the senator that I'm meeting with is very, very active in helping students who get scammed by like ITT Tech and for-profit schools. Now, do you think that would be a good way to segue into a larger issue of student debt, like use that as a toehold to kind of start that conversation, or do you think not, because a lot of the people at those schools tend to be undergrads, and I don't want to start, you know what I mean? Like, do I run the risk of conflating the undergrad and the graduate experience if I do that?
Well, so that's one of the issues with student debt. So when people, so there's a couple of misconceptions about student debt. When people think about student, when we talk about like default, like people are under the conception that, or the perception that student loan borrowers don't pay their money. Right. The federal government has collected in the history of the student loan program 99 point some, or the percent of them that borrow student debt. So it makes money. The thing with where a lot of the student debt comes from actually the for-profit schools.
Yeah.
Because what they do is their prices are high because they want to make a profit.
If you're watching tomorrow, come back for more information. We'll see you later. We're just practicing right now. Thanks.
Like for-profit schools, that could be, and it just depends on who you talk to, and you kind of
because I feel like I could spin it in such a way that like students at a lot of those schools kind of get scammed out of their education, so they still take out loans to pay for those schools, and then that increased loan burden is partially responsible for the need to increase the loan interest rate for graduates. So I'm wondering if far-fetched of a connection, or do you think that's tight enough to connect that issue with our issue?
Well, ultimately, the reason the subsidies were pulled from actually was to pay for Pell Grant for undergrads.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, the thing that's keeping the student loan program going is graduate borrowers. And the graduate borrowers, like I said, are making 77% of the federal government off of grad students. 77%.
Off of 13% of the student.
On 13%, on 13% of the borrowing population,
Yeah.
77% of the borrowing. And so you could, it depends on, I would say, who you're talking to and how the conversation is going. You could use that as a segue into the larger issue of student debt.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, use that as a way to kind of introduce our concern about it, because it's a broader issue that the senator is interested in. So, because like he just released a press statement 2 days ago about trying to help students from ITT Tech and what was that other Corinthians, I think it was. So I figured, ooh, this is something that they literally just released a press release about 2 days ago. It's probably something that's on their mind. That might be a good way to kind of demonstrate that I'm keeping abreast of their office's policies, but also a way to kind of introduce the issue of student debt, which is one of the things that we're
Fair
talking
value,
about.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, I can do that.
No, I do.
Okay, I wanted to get your take on it. Thanks.
I don't actually.
We use fair Shit.
the IRS guidance books. So what we were saying is like we want to bring this to your attention. We've been told that this is something that might need a legislative fix. Obviously,
Oh, yes.
it's probably not going to happen during this session, but we want it to be on your radar.
Come back as late as you want if you get that.
Legislation needs passed.
That was
You're
Hope
always
it won't be in vain, though.
in writing a letter
I
to
mean,
the Departments
she
of Labor,
she's
Treasury,
really good.
and
She's
Health
well
and Human
connected.
Services. We would
She's
appreciate
been
that. So
working.
you get a project.
She started off as a state attorney before we
Oh wow.
when we were together.
Right.
So by the time she was a senior, she was like offered a job. And she
Flat out.
she
Yeah.
did
Yeah, so if you need to
very
access my
briefly
email,
on Capitol Hill.
or these meetings might not
Worked
work.
for
So
public
Is that
safety.
everyone in here? Wonderful. Fantastic. So we pretty much put that together.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I didn't even think that I didn't know that was
we
a thing.
probably have the same
Cody,
problem.
I didn't get the
We
process.
have access to Medicaid, but we don't have anybody to take it.
Oh, you don't have it.
We love it. We have like, yeah, we have like.
So I found it off market because it had not beat the rate of management. Look back on my account. Alright.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay. So, a couple things I have to figure out is how to incentivize
Research other things that I did.
Every year.
Okay.
Yeah. You might be surprised in the Republican offices. I say this because the Republican office we actually got the most traction and they asked for a letter for it. Kathy McWard Rogers. And she tries to repeal that every session.
Connected.
Yeah. If you like listen to her stuff, she hates it, et cetera, et cetera. She wants to repeal
Why
it.
do you think they hate it?
But the staffer was like, no, it's worth it. It
No,
turns out
I
that
used to
they
think
don't
that
actually hate all of the
that
ACA, they
purpose,
hate
but
certain
sometimes I
parts of
forget
it,
that it
but
actually hates it. Alright.
right. So it seems like
So
even
on
talking to
Monday,
the
we're gonna
Republicans
talk
that we
with
were talking about it repeatedly, most of them seem to agree with that getting
and then
more healthcare towards
okay, let
that
me
part of
finish
it.
on one other
They
thought
disagree on how that's done.
before it gets tricky.
So this one, the way we were spinning it in the Republican office is like it's not a good use of taxpayer dollars. We're talking like an $8,000 difference.
So two reasons why they're either are gonna have a happener or taking over. Is so for each have exactly about 4 months.
That'd be interesting to see.
So I'm going to submit some probably really
Right.
um so
Right. Yeah.
130 so there are two 336
You can also spin it as,
again
if University of Arkansas loses subsidized health insurance for their graduate students, it impedes the university's ability to attract high quality graduate students who are going full enrollment funding, who are going to up, the quality of the university, pull more, economic support into the region. So you could also do it in that way as well. Right. Everybody always gets it. Right. It's hard for us too. We were the only state in the country that our legislature froze tuition for grad students and then actually increased it by 15% for undergrad. So they were like, oh, you're fine. Like, what's your fine? Right. Ben Fellows right there. Yale or something.
and hoping somebody
Yeah, well, it sounded like you're trying to work through your thought as you're typing, so I was just like,
so I'm like higher ed and
oh,
higher ed and
no, the committee's just education.
education.
It's not. There's a subcommittee.
Okay. So, and they want to, it's gonna
classic federal government
For the
contradiction.
same reason I mentioned it'd be good to have better names. I don't know what the CEO of the story is. I'll look at it first.
So when are we like getting into our discussion? So this can be the supreme legal and senators we are discussing.
Because we have that.
Yeah.
Stop share button right here.
I don't know. I don't remember where it's from. So I can get
All the
All right, and then we're gonna look at the Advocacy operation. Cool. Wish luck. See you tomorrow. Tonight, actually.
I guess don't understand.
Okay. Have fun.
Now if we're getting blown out, which may be the case.
See you later, Jesse. I'll do it in front of the webcam. Okay. Which I paused for 100% sure. Oh, people kind of took off already.
I'm gonna go Facebook Live and see.
Yeah, let's do Facebook Live. What are we talking about? The 5 or at LAD?
To turn around and have them back on.
We're practicing for
Do it live.
Day before.
what? This is
I think you were with me only on the day before.
Go live, we have to go live.
okay.
Alright, so we'll start off. I'll start off the hey, I'm back again. I'm here with Katie, Director of Legislative Affairs. Then you take it away and talk about what we're doing next.
Sounds good.
I'm saying like last time in the past LED, we had completely house bills only.
Alright.
Practicing for coding.
Ready?
Ready.
Building that's not code switching building, which is when the Russell building to the Rayburn building.
Hi everybody.
It's not a quick fix.
Hey everybody, we're back again here at LAD. This is Christopher Kumber, President and CEO of NAGPS, and this is
I'm Katie Harris. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for NAGPS. And behind us here, you can see some 50, 60 odd students practicing for their congressional meetings on Monday. We had a really fun little role play for a while, and our students were really interested in exactly what was going to happen in offices. But they sound like they're doing a great job, so tune in for more tomorrow.
yeah, in case you guys don't know, a couple items from our legislative conference. We are here advocating for student debt, or for a reduction in student debt for graduate and professional students. Many of you may be familiar with our campaign, Grads Have Debt Too. So we want to see a reunification of student loan interest rates and a return of in-school interest subsidy for graduate and professional students. We're also here advocating for open access, which is Katie.
The Free Access to Science, Technology, and Research Act. It would make it available. It's the research. It would make research available for anybody. You wouldn't have those pesky paywalls when you're trying to get access to an article. So that one we're really hoping for this time. Another thing we're really trying to get going is healthcare. So there was a recent interpretation of the ACA that would prohibit universities from providing subsidized healthcare to graduate students. So our students are going to be talking about that. We're going to talk about that a little more tomorrow, which maybe we'll live stream that.
A couple more things. We want to see a sustained and increased support for basic research in the United States, because oftentimes those grants and whatnot go to fund graduate education through research and teaching internships. And a big issue is also our visa policy for F1 students. We'd like to see a mechanism created where international students can renew their F1 visas domestically, because of issues many of our international colleagues have with getting stuck outside of the United States. So I know that was kind of wrong, but we're happy to be here in DC on your behalf, and you'll see us tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Why not?
Why not? Facebook Live. We're gonna walk around.
Sure, I will too.
It's really funny. You
I
feel
remember the
like
phone
punched around
even
over here, but
120
all
capacity.
day
That's
it's
what I'm
just like
like.
covered in snow.
So
Okay,
And
I'll
then
be a
it'll
little
start
Give it
getting
nervous.
cold
110.
and hard and hard.
Exactly.
Because the problems are getting
Okay,
harder and
so
harder.
my question was,
So I think saying
so
something
we have
like that,
two
because
things
it's
at
like it's
3:30, right?
super
Or three things.
you're not just
Three.
like
We have one thing at 3,
and so our
We're
like
not we're not
We have
putting
one
off.
thing at 2 and two things at 3:30. So
yeah.
general
We're
education
like
committee at 3:30. And what do we have other things?
small business.
The small business. And where is that?
I don't know right now. You remember where it is?
So
Nope.
so
You were supposed
who
to
knows
sign
that?
up for it this morning, and I will be getting an email if you signed up.
So you're the
Otherwise, you can't go because you have to get clearance. So if you didn't sign up for it, you can't go.
so I have
I signed up for it, so I'm going to the SBA.
I was gonna send the email though. But to walk you through so that you have comfort.
Oh, well, I was gonna go with Caitlin, who's already going.
Alright.
She's gonna meet up with me in Bronco.
Okay, so you're good. Yeah, alright. Then you don't need it.
so I'm not going at the 3:30, so I'm going at the 3, or I'm going at the other 3:30.
No, you're going at the 3.
I'm going at the 3.
Sorry,
You're
Peta.
not going to the other 2.
So I'm going at the
The only reason why I'm
Unless he's
asking
super interested in entrepreneurship.
now SBA International can't go because they're offering discounted
Right.
allowances. Discussion would be geared towards their small businesses that get the small startups. Um, he could talk to their VP on just wanted to see. And having worked with our legal startup center at Newhouse, I've had those conversations before. So
Right.
I was gonna go, but then Sam said I'd have to go to this place, which I, through text message, may be able to release, could vary depending on how he gets things done.
So current plan is I'm going at 11
And I'm going to
and one
mention
thirty, then 3.
that like I will be doing those
And for
education events
Oh,
which
wait, 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 wait.
basically mean
the
online
MSL
education
research,
will be sent
so
to you
after
like the
graduation.
steps you need to get them started.
4th.
Right?
Oh, so basically, hey, tell us who supports this thing, and we'll tell you what to do.
Well, I'm gonna say it at the end.
4th.
And maybe Monday we'll find a date to have one more meeting.
On Monday? On Monday only. That meeting will be on
On
Tuesday.
maybe on Monday we will find a date to have one more
So
meeting.
I
And would
and
that
you
additional
I
meeting
don't
would
know
be on
when
Monday
Monday
or
will
speaking
be.
of Surya's hand, because you're the one who made the request on the agenda.
So right now I'm doing
So
sweet.
Oh, I was writing it down.
I'm
Sorry.
Oh, you're
envisioning
writing it down?
I'm
Cool.
writing it
Sorry.
down so I can send it to everybody.
Awesome. You rock.
um
Yeah, and if you have any inspiration sheets, because like I know I've taken notes on all of the representatives in their committees. I didn't think to from the staffers.
and then
So
so
if you
also
have like
like
information that
the
maybe we
basic
all should
project
have going
in
into it, I mean, yeah, you can send it in an email, but if people want physical copies, I can go on campus just like as normal schedule. I can go and I can print it off.
experience validation, created the teaching center,
So
like
we'll
Cool.
I'll try to get that.
If you need something printed, Grace,
We
at
could
least you
put
guys
something
know.
together and get it to you. Alright, so into time to exchange
two-thirds
notes
of our graduate
from
students are international.
So
Dominic.
problems with visas and
So that is
So you are doing it on a Google Drive or something which
No,
is
I'm
like
gonna resend it to you.
you can probably use Google Drive and everybody will be able to use it on
and
Google Drive.
then
One software they talked about being on the Apple. Didn't we just talk about that? Or I told you that's why I paid you? One software.
it's coming.
Okay, very basic.
is it more compelling to send two forms or like take one and send it?
Some.
Just two. Good.
So sorry for that.
When did you went to the Arkansas? You went to the Arkansas, right?
No. This is for the internship.
So as we finish our lecture,
No.
I don't think
I
it
just
would
have
be a
never
bad
had the
choice.
ability.
Disease or desire.
Really just never happened. Actually, I think the closest I've ever come was kind of by mid-state Iowa. Yeah, I was
Dominic, where are you university?
Cortland.
Good.
We would ask them to like
I'm all set.
put this
Okay.
letter
Albany?
She
in
said around
the church.
2:45.
No, I'm actually in
We'll
Brunswick.
get
Oh, yes,
together.
Yeah.
I remember you
And
told me
we have a
There's
you
model
this
use that
thing that my
as
knee
the
keeps hitting,
why
and
you
I'm
need to
prone.
be bruised.
Yeah,
I
you
do.
just listen
I'm
to it.
prone to these things, and I will continue to do it.
You
Like I
will.
don't learn.
Very nice. Nice to meet
Classical
you.
conditioning does not apply
I
to
got
me.
the last semester last year.
Okay.
So I went to the accredited society.
Very nice.
And
Congratulations.
the master degree is medical history.
Both of them.
So I feel like
GSO
for
and
my
medical history.
personal story, I could probably talk about debt and open access, but I'm not sure how much. Well, I also work with a lot of international students. They're my colleagues, and my work kind of relies, I guess, on their collaboration. So we're gonna talk about this environment.
We're not gonna talk about it in the sense that we're talking about it here as a doctor's chair. So what we want is for the students to sit down to
Yeah, I need to memorize our
co-author
address.
add a signature to a letter that was written to the State Department to authorize the whole thing, the renewal of their current regulations.
Get the results from that.
And then I think with Surrey, I think what you need to do is say that like you need access to these books for research, and CMU has to like make really tough funding choices about which ones they're gonna buy. It might not be like textbook, might be your unlucky year that you can't get some pieces of something like that. Like CMU has to choose paywalls and research, I think is the basic.
Any of that.
So, and then I think we can get into the ask, which is like ask to get a vote on it.
Dominic, was it you who reached us yesterday?
Yeah, that's what I wrote.
Bringing up the things that they brought up here, which is that it's like partisan,
Yeah, are we supposed to at least ask the co-sponsor?
we co-sponsor or do something else to get into it.
Should we start out as a sponsor?
So it's out of consent.
Okay, so let's bring up
Yeah, it's not, no one's pushing for it to go to a vote. It's 4-0. So bipartisan and budget 4-0, I think are major selling points of this.
Especially for Jamie, because he needs to
Oh, they're gonna be new
so he can
tonight.
speak more. Yeah, it has
Dan,
yeah.
Okay.
It's through one committee.
call one of them.
So Surya, you're like person. By the way, we re-opened
Are there, so I know we have different talking points.
Right.
Where do I?
Oh, on the website?
Are they on the website?
Yes, they are. I
secretive.
don't believe the health insurance is part of state because we'll be sending out all of the stuff, the talking points, the senator's letter, the IRS
We should know a lot about
guidance.
research.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure if the ones that we're going to talk about
Yes, the
are the
main
only
four
ones.
are for sure. I think just health insurance is not because it's just now being talked about.
Well, like
So.
education seemed like very interesting.
If we're gonna have
Like agriculture topics or something.
Really, like, in my field, biology, progress is stalled because emissions keep getting decided for us, like by
Yeah, legislative platform under government
yeah, I think
relations.
that's a good thing.
Maybe we'd be like 2 years ahead on whatever research, even real,
Yeah.
hopefully by the end of
Yeah.
this year.
do is you should. So I wouldn't do
Okay, well this
the
is
background info
so I think
here.
I think hopefully you
I
can
mean,
see if you
we're
want to
talking about
leave
homework now, right?
for case
Yeah.
study.
So
I think you
I could
definitely
do the
want to hit,
background
like
info.
I said, I think you
Alright.
should hit open access and
Okay.
open education. And then it's kind of, I'm not sure what you're gonna go. Do you want to try hands and clones? Do we want to try training? Because email really just in general. What's the
wording in a speech?
No, you have to have a message.
Yeah, so there is no creative wording in a
You
speech.
can get a so like if you're going with most of the PhD programs that are 5 years or more,
Yeah.
you go in without a master and you get a master in the first 2 years.
Okay, can we focus on
Yeah.
what we're supposed to be
Sorry,
doing here?
we're trying to figure out break down homework.
And they were like,
Student loan,
they were
student
like, yes,
debt,
you're not employees and you don't get the
student debt.
Dividends.
Oh, and student tax.
that was so
Oh,
annoying.
maybe
You're
not.
No, I can.
apparently
I mean,
not really
I have done with student debt last year as well, so I'm pretty good with it.
So, were you in the one with the budget meetings too?
no student help
With how the budget, to break down the budget?
this doesn't know how to use
I
online
took
information.
another class.
Okay, so you'll be a budget person. Then back out. For the life of me, I think I don't know. So student debt.
Manage a budget. Yeah, I can manage a budget. Like, I hated public budget items. I hated that it was a required cost.
Higher in funding. You said you were gonna do that, right? Last year.
I've never learned
Literally
And I
that.
think you should. Then you should also do higher funding too. You're taking it from a different sense.
Okay, I'll try to find out ahead of time, but I still think
That
it's
way you
safer
work
to
it out.
just
Because there were some points on there, like Javis said, they start from Javis. I have no idea what the acronym is. JANN. That, the government explained.
Okay, Daniel says it's unsubsidized
Oh,
development.
graduate assistance in areas of
Yeah,
national
it
need.
says that
There you go.
it's strictly applicable.
And what needs are?
In national.
National
Oh.
I don't understand the issue with the open access because I don't know if it's just at Syracuse, but I never have an issue finding the information I need and I never have to pay for it.
I know. And the
Is
perfect
that just
person.
SU is the awesome place to be or what?
When I come, you see when you come to events like this, you realize how Syracuse is.
Yeah.
Right?
You're all like TJ.
Well, so
I know.
I'm in Portland, and I always have to do
Dude.
interlibrary loans for articles. Where do they come from? They come from Syracuse.
Nice.
Well, so there was Rajesh, who's the president. He was telling me about an article he wrote. He wrote an article that got published, and he was promoting Berkeley Tech to being supportive. And that school did not have access to the place that the article was from, so he had to pay for his paper.
Wow. And I mean, sure, we're not paying
They're
for
looking
it.
at, they're like, what?
Isn't it in his computer? Like, I don't understand.
I mean, it's kind of not like
He wrote it, so it's like,
Yeah, but
why
that's
do you have to pay for it? He knows what's in it.
yeah, but in certain things like
the official article that's been
or
reviewed.
citing or engaging with it or using it in class and stuff like that.
But the other issue is, sure, at Syracuse we're not paying for articles directly, but our tuition dollars are because Syracuse has to pay for all these licenses.
Oh my gosh.
It's huge. Huge.
Well, good for Syracuse. They got their budgeting together and they have
No.
funding
No.
No.
finances to do it.
No, I can listen.
Syracuse is broke.
Syracuse is really what you just said is the best debates ever. Best debates ever.
I'm gonna work on it.
The library access, I mean, library access
for these articles, we talk about textbooks and at undergrad level we push a lot of articles because our database system is so expensive and Syracuse, in order for Syracuse to maintain it, they need to make sure that students are consistent.
So I just wanted to let you all know there's about 10 minutes left of like official time. And then don't forget that the tour is going to leave from the lobby at 4:30. So if you want to get on that, that'll be happening.
When I was at UWE, my
Yep.
interlibrary loan from another campus cost me, I had to pay over $12.
Wow.
I could see it online to get the students. I could pay them. I had to go to Syracuse to get that. And you don't have to do that at UWE. And you can get books from like
Oh, that's
State.
important.
And no, there are other universities who have to they push it for students to do library. But books are gonna be
Higher ed funded.
higher funded. We're gonna do science. And you can read it. I gave you the
The debt. You can have my debt too.
I'll take both of those.
Like 60 or 70 grand of it if you want it.
My school tuition
we
is
need to
80,000.
we need to work on our student loan. We were talking about this at the tour announcement. When last time you were doing workshops with them. So you forget. When we meet, we can talk about that.
We're meeting tomorrow 7 a.m. for that.
Please meet with Sam tomorrow. He's gonna tell us about an advocacy thing he's going on and how what we should do and working on things that are more entity level awards that deal with what's going on in policy, what's going on. He's gonna get down for you.
At what time?
Well, I wrote 7, but I don't think anyone's getting up at 7. I just wrote it.
Sunday, Peter.
I know. I wrote it in there with the hopes that we could figure out when would be more
What time do we
appropriate.
start back here?
7.
So if we breakfast at like 8.
Yeah, we can do 8. We don't have
Together.
to do 7. We can do 8. 8 is reasonable.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
So are we going down to the lobby to
Yeah.
just eat breakfast
And talk about
the house?
yeah, how get an idea of whether the advocacy position and who's with what.
So as far as homework, we're just supposed to
We can make
research
it. I was gonna
topics
say,
and
yeah, we're
sort of
gonna write a
craft
couple
our
lines.
personal
Fine
narrative.
line.
Oh, you should right now.
Research the facts and the issue, what the current position is, what bills have gone through. You want to know what bills have gone through
Right.
on those topics. At least even if it's open and non-scholarship, what people are watching.
I also have some
Higher funding. I would
Is FAFSA part of that or is that the open access thing?
I think faster is open. I would
Yes.
That doesn't connect to the higher ed funding.
You know, I was on the news yesterday or the day before, Europe said by 2020 we're gonna
We're
have
gonna have a
both
full
access
hour.
for all.
Yes, the EU, the commission is trying to push that.
2020 is their goal. Is that worth bringing up?
Yeah, I would bring it up.
That's
The
not my
only-
talking point, but
Well, no, I mean, I think the only,
I'll give
because
that to
I've